Welcome back to SheCan, where role models inspire by sharing their insights, their lessons learned, sharing their tips and lived experiences. And I'm so excited to have Nora Wilhelm here today. Nora Wilhelm, welcome to SheCan. You are a social innovator and systems entrepreneur dedicated to driving positive change for a regenerative and just future. You are a speaker of Forbes 30 Under 30, and you have a real interest in shifting paradigms, which I love because this is a really big vision. And you lead with that vision. You're a Dalai Lama fellow. You are the founder of Parima, and
Mhm.
Parima is a support hub for change workers, social entrepreneurs, and aspiring system change leaders. You have a mentorship program, workshops, various workshops, many workshops, a fellowship, a change work compass, and you'll tell us more about those later. And you're also the founder of The Well, the Change Atelier. And that is a space where you can reconnect to yourself and your creativity with art-based workshops, tools, and practices. And you have a workshop coming up, and you'll tell us more about that as well. But no, Nora, let's start with the sort of pivotal points in your journey that you feel led you up to where you are today.
Let's do that. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for creating this space. So I would say, looking back, I was already a pretty, curious and justice-oriented child. Sometimes probably to the dismay of, my peers and my teachers. Already very, picking up on when things just didn't seem just, or the things that we now know are outdated about how we were taught as children, things like gender roles and so on. I think there was something, I don't know, very deeply rooted in me that was already just questioning and challenging certain things that were just transmitted to us as the status quo. And then I think the turning point for me was when I was 15, 16 years old. And I had this awakening to the state of the world. I had this moment when I was on exchange in Canada during my high school years. And I met the now ex-wife of the General Romeo Dallaire. He was the head of the Blue Helmets, so the UN peacekeeping troops during the Rwanda genocide in 1994. And this lady came and gave a talk about that, about what happened. And it was for a long time considered the major failure of the international community to not intervene and to have so many people lose their lives in this process. And I, in the same kind of, weeks or months, found out about deforestation, found out about what happens behind closed doors at slaughterhouses. I just had these kind of informations that came at me a little bit like a curveball and burst this childhood bubble, perhaps, that I had been growing up in. And from that point onwards, I was set on the course that I was going to contribute to change in whatever way I can.
Nora, and so how did you take those incredible moments where it feels like truths hit you that you were sheltered by beforehand? And how did you take it to sort of a life mission, which is what you live now, because it's more than a job, it's a real life purpose.
Yeah, I think it truly is a calling. Um, there's definitely a moment of shock, maybe even despair, grief, in some cases, anger. Like I remember having a phase where I looked at, my parents who are, middle class, like good people, right? And also not change workers who are like dedicating their lives to this. So there was a time when I think when we sometimes learn new things, there's a pendulum that swings to one extreme, right? So I had a phase where I was so shocked and so angry and so in despair that I looked around me and I couldn't understand why other people who knew these same things were not equally shocked, right? Were not equally compelled to
Mm.
take action, to change their behavior, to make different choices, to try and contribute, right? I could not understand it. And it took me a while to kind of circle around that and come back to a place of understanding that we all have different ways of contributing. We all have different, access to information, different capacities, different also responsibilities in life, different opportunities, different gifts. And I remember seeing a TED talk at the time that spoke about daily leadership. this idea that how we show up every single day and how we treat each other, how we interact, how whether I smile at someone on the street or right, just these daily things of how we treat each other, how we show up, the decisions we make every single day, whether that's around consumption or interactions, all have an impact, right? And there was a very poignant example in this TED Talk where this person later actually found out that he had, in a way, saved someone's life through this interaction, right? That someone was really thinking about not staying in this particular place, maybe not even wanting to live this life. And sometimes we just don't know how small interactions can really have a ripple effect, can really change the course of maybe potentially someone's life and not just someone's day. And so I kind of developed this philosophy that, okay, it is really about that. It is about how we all show up every single day. It's about finding what is ours to contribute. And maybe someone's contribution is to be an amazing teacher and mother and neighbor and friend. And that's a great contribution, right? We need wonderful people who are active within the fabric of society, not just people who kind of, take up arms and say, here's what we got to change. There are people who are working within the systems also to make meaningful contributions. So I think it took me a while to like integrate those difficult emotions and find a way to not just for me to contribute, but to understand and value everyone's different contribution.
Yeah. Nora, I'm so impressed with this big vision that you must have had since you are very young. And I always feel that we have a lot of young people who are very overwhelmed with the status quo and the world that they were born into. And they want to do and bring about change, but they often don't know what are the steps to doing that. So walk us through. You went to St. Gallen to the university. You then went to Cambridge. What did you study? What were the first steps where you thought, this is where I can bring my genius to the table, and this is how I can start this walk to becoming a systems entrepreneur, which is what you call yourself now, and where you're really actively working towards creating change on a daily basis?
My general biggest recommendation for everyone, no matter the age, is to really just start exactly where you are. Because I feel like one of the things that makes people very powerless is believing that they have no power, that there's nothing that they can do, that there's no way to influence these big challenges, that whatever they do doesn't make a difference. And I think that's just one of the biggest lies that we are told, and that keeps us disempowered, that keeps us disconnected from our agency and our influence. So that's the first thing, to kind of have this inner faith that what I do matters, that I can make a difference. And I think there's a quote um, by I believe it's, yeah, let me redo this. There's a quote by Jane Goodall that says something like, you always make a difference. The question is, do you want to choose what kind of difference you make? So that for me is the truth. It's like everything we do has an impact. Every choice makes a difference. And it's about whether I want to make a conscious choice, what that difference is, or whether I just want to follow along and follow, the stream, whatever the mainstream currently is doing. So that for me is the first thing, like just own that agency, own that power, and then just start right from where you are. So for me, it doesn't make sense when I first noticed the big problems in the world to kind of want to grasp at solving world hunger or reforming the UN or, right, like changing the past. These are things that are not available to me, even though I would like them to be at the time. So what I did is I started with what really bothers me around me, right? What are things that I notice, injustices, things that are just unsustainable? And even with my limited knowledge, I can tell these things are unsustainable. And I started kind of mobilizing other young people around me to get active because there are actually so many opportunities. For example, I worked with the Youth Red Cross because the Red Cross originated in Geneva with Henri Dunant, so there's a legacy around that. So I got engaged with the Youth Red Cross. I was teaching, learning, and then teaching other people about international humanitarian law. I was working with Caritas, which is a poverty-oriented and inclusion-oriented NGO that does more local work. I was working with international NGOs, and then through that, I got to working with the UN. So it's just, in my experience, one thing leads to the next, right? When you just start with where you are, with what bothers you, with things that you can access and influence in your immediate surroundings, that will lead you to the next step. So rather than spend 5 years dreaming up a master plan or thinking, I first need to study, I need to get this degree. No, no, no. Like you can start right where you are. And in fact, you will probably be more qualified for the degree and for any jobs that you may consider applying for afterwards if you show up with a track record of a person who is not, right, like keeping their arms crossed and just waiting, but like is actually willing to get their hands dirty and just go for it. And then the next thing I think is applicable for young people, but also women and in general people who have been stigmatized and put into boxes, is just to sometimes not take no for an answer, like not accept the boxes that we are put into. So one example is that I remember that I had some free time off of school because I had sufficiently good grades. And so I went knocking on the doors of different NGOs, including the Red Cross. And I said, hey, I would like to do an internship. You know, you don't even have to pay me. Here's the skills I have. I'm so motivated. I want to contribute. And they looked at me and went like, well, you know, you're 16 or 17. I don't remember exactly. And we usually only give internships to people who finished their bachelor's degree. And I was like, mm-hmm. And here's all the things I can contribute. And then they were like, okay, like, let's do this, right? So, and I'm not saying this is going to work every time. I've experienced tons of rejection, right? That's kind of part of putting yourself out there is experiencing rejection for sure. And sometimes people will say yes. And unless you knock on the door and you pitch yourself and you pitch that you want to contribute, people don't have the opportunity to say yes to you. So I think that's my in a way my recommendation. So first, acknowledge how much power you actually do have. Then second, start right where you are, get active. Don't spend too much time theorizing or getting lost in the very big questions. Just look, where can I contribute right now? And then third, no matter where you are, if you see an opportunity, go for it. Knock on the door, send the email, send the pitch, get active, try it, and then see where it goes. Because in my experience, this just expands the scope of what is possible. And then everyone is around like, how did you do that? And I was like, well, I just did one thing at a time and I just kept going.
Nora, so tell us what you did. You studied, you learned the sort of underpinnings of and the knowledge and you had the resources to really dive into the sort of theoretical realm of what interested you. What were your first jobs? And I know you suffered a burnout, and after that you thought that can't just be me, that must be many other people who are in the same situation. In fact, that's very true. And we know that, and we know the numbers of burnout are going up exponentially. And then you set up your two ventures. So talk to us a little bit about that phase of working, of really trying to make your mark and actually burning out.
So I definitely started quite young next to all the volunteering I did, the internships I did. I did a lot of, helping younger kids with school. I taught English. I was a tutor in kind of English-based camps. I did really all sorts of things, a bunch of stuff as work on the side. Eventually, I did go to university. So like you said, I went to St. Gallen, but I have to say that most of what I learned and who kind of I am today, I don't credit to the university studies. I credit to everything I did next to it. So how it unfolded for me is that through getting involved with the UN work, I then discovered something called the European Youth Parliament, which, if you don't know, have a look. If you're based anywhere in Europe, in the wider sense, it goes all the way to Azerbaijan in terms of the participating countries. And it's this amazing youth organization where you first participate as a delegate and you get to discuss these big challenges, these policy problems that we're facing, whether it's climate change, ecosystem collapse, or women's rights, or democracy, right? And you engage with these topics. And the incredible thing about it is that it's completely volunteer run. So pretty quickly, you find yourself having had such a great time that you want to organize a session back home, right? And so you start organizing events, and suddenly you learn project management, and you learn fundraising, and you learn media work, and you learn all sorts of things that will be so useful later on as really practical skills. And so the kind of pinnacle of that for me, and I must say I probably spent most time, most of my time on that compared to my studies, was that I organized in 2016 a international session where 350 young people from all over Europe came together in Switzerland, in Lax, and the president of our country came and gave a talk. Like, it was this huge deal, and we fundraised a lot of money for like a I was, what was I, 20-year-old or something? And we were a bunch of volunteers, right? Of teenagers and young adults who did this completely on a volunteer basis. So that for me, I think, is where I learned a lot of the skills, the practical skills of change work, but really of any work. And from there, I had slowly this realization that for all my optimism and all of our youthful, vision and drive and wanting to change things, even if we mobilized double the people that we were at the time, triple the people that we were at the time, I had to acknowledge that probably this would not be enough to actually solve the challenges we were facing, right? I came to this kind of realization that the challenges are so deeply entrenched. It's not just a matter of being motivated, of having more people, of being more compelling, more convincing. It's really a matter of looking at the systems that we build and realizing that, for example, extractive capitalism with the concentration of power and of resources at the 0.1% level that we are experiencing now, at the cost of literally everyone else, is unsustainable. It's unsustainable for our democracies, for our structures, right? As we're witnessing, for example, the collapse of the US democracy at the moment, but it's also just not viable for our planet and our survival. And so in this realization, I shifted my focus from youth work to systems change. And so I created something together with others called Collaborat Helvetica, which is a word play on, for those who know Switzerland, is always abbreviated CH. It's because the actual name of the country is Confederatio Helvetica, the Helvetic Confederation, because we were never under a king or queen. We grew as a union of regions. And so in kind of reference to that, we were like, if we have been able to build a country when people were killing each other over these differences, over the language differences, over the religious differences, shouldn't we be able to use the same ability of dialogue and of compromise and of finding solutions together to address the complex challenges of today? And so I worked on that for about 7 years, pushing systems change in Switzerland, explaining to stakeholders what this is, working with government and city governments and administrations, with businesses, big NGOs, big networks, and also training hundreds of people in systems change and in how to do this work to try to foster this type of change work specifically in Switzerland. And that's also where I burned out. So I did in parallel do also the degree in Cambridge. So I kind of did the both at once, right, at some point. And there was for sure a lot to carry, right? Because having such a big vision was just so much to hold. And it was, I think, for me, a leap, right? From being in the youth space where I was used to being told, what you want to do is not possible. That was like my modus operandi, right? Like someone told me it's not possible. I'd be like, let's see, just watch, and I would go out and do it. And that's what I did. That's how I ran this conference in Lux. Everyone told me it's impossible to fundraise this much money. No one has ever done that. And I was like, I think we can. And we did. And so when I entered the systems change field, I had a little bit the same attitude, right? Like, oh, this is a big vision, but like, let's do it. And I did not understand, or I was not prepared for the fact that the deeper the change you advocate for, the stronger the resistance is going to be. And this is explained by studies that if someone is very invested in the status quo, say I'm making all of my money because of the status quo, right? For example, all my portfolio is the fossil fuel industry. If you come to me and say, hey, I think the fossil industry, needs to be reformed, needs to come to an end at some point, otherwise we're all going to die. I'm not going to be very open, right, to your ideas because my whole income depends on it. Same for entire states, right? Infrastructure, same for my identity. If my whole identity is tied up in being this kind of person and you say something that challenges that identity, I most likely will be very resistant to what you say. And so I was not prepared for the fact that as a young change leader, I was doing important and valuable work. I don't want to minimize it. I don't want to make it sound, like infantile or something like this. But in the eyes of the powerful stakeholders, in a way, it was not threatening, right? It was like, oh, yeah, let the kids do what they be doing. Do it, have the conferences, debate, we'll give you some money for it. It doesn't threaten their power or their status or their income, right? Because it doesn't threaten the system at the paradigm level. It doesn't threaten like the place where the things are really entrenched. It's in a way a little bit more on the surface. So when I made that shift from working on here to wanting to work on this, I was not prepared for how intense the resistance would be and the like less support you receive, of course, right? And so I think many factors contributed to me burning out, including like a chronic over investment in work and in measuring my worth with how much I contributed, and right, having little self-esteem besides the impact that I could create. So there's definitely a huge part that's mine. That's my internal process, my inner work. And there was also this realization that, like, wow, okay, this is much more difficult. This is a completely different way of operating and of working. And there is such that I'll do a retake. And there is such fewer support available for you when you do that. And that's also why I now created Paraima. So Paraima's purpose is really to support people who want to do systems change work, but not just let them run blindly into it. Like, that's why I'm so open also about my burnout and the challenges of this work, to really hopefully equip people, not just with the skills and theories and approaches to do it, but really also the practical preparation to be resilient in the face of the challenges.
Nora, I love listening to you because it's a very personal story, but it's also a collective story. And it's a story of having the incredible energy and generosity and drive to really want to bring about change from a young age, and then understanding the challenges that we all face when doing the work. And that can be very isolating, and you experience that. And you set up Parima for that reason. So tell us a little bit the things that you do with Parima and through Parima, and who you help and who this is for.
Absolutely, I'll be happy to do so. So my focus was at first people who are doing systems change work, right? So I thought these people who are out there on the front lines doing this work, I know the challenges firsthand, right? Because I've lived through them. I know them even secondhand at scale because I've supported dozens, if not hundreds of people in facing them, in learning about them. So I'm aware that there are these challenges around finding funding, finding support, around potentially burning out and not being able to handle the weight of this work and the pushback, of being able to navigate power dynamics and increase your own perceived legitimacy, like to a point where you have the power to convene certain stakeholders, or at least they have to take you seriously, right? You cannot just easily be brushed aside. So I really wanted to create a support ecosystem for people like that. And that's why I created a fellowship. We just opened our first round and we got many, many great applications. We're in the process of working through them right now, where the intention is to, over the coming years, support these people with the hands-on challenges. So we will tell their stories, we will increase their visibility, we will also help them with their strategies, with anything that they need hands-on support with, right? Funding approaches and all of that. And then, kind of backtracking from there, I realized that the number one question I get asked after a speech, after a podcast, after any type of engagement is, how did you get to do this work? Like, how did you get to this point? How did you find this calling, this purpose? And how can I find mine? So I believe that there are so many people out there who are looking for their contribution, who are looking, craving, like, I really want to contribute. I really want to find what's mine to do. How do I do that? And there are also people who knew what their purpose was, like I did, right? When I was working with the European Youth Parliament and all this youth work. And then suddenly we start questioning again, right? Because I
Mm,
believe purpose is a cyclical process. It's not just
yeah,
I find my thing and I do that for the next 50 years. It's like, well,
yeah,
I plant some seeds, I tend to them, they grow into a project, into something beautiful. I learn from it, I harvest, right, the fruits of that labor. And then from that, I plant seeds again. And whether those seeds are very close to what I did before, or maybe an evolution or a next step, that usually happens, right? At least over time. And so I was like, okay, I need to offer something to these people asking this question, because clearly it's on people's minds. So what I did is I created an online program called the Changework Compass. It's our first online program that over the course of 10 weeks takes people from this process of not knowing what is there to do from that place to having a clear sense of their unique contribution that is informed by who they are, by what they see is happening in the world, what they feel passionate about, by the vision that they hold for the future. Because many people forget that, right? We tend to fight against things that we don't like or we see are problematic, but how many of us can really articulate the vision for the future? So we go through all of that, and people at the end leave with this clear sense of what's theirs to do and what the next steps are to get there. And when we ran this program for the first time in the last semester, it completely sold out. So I was like, okay, this is clearly a big topic for many people. There's clearly demand for this. And so I'm running it again now in spring. The doors are actually open since I believe yesterday. So I'm really excited about that. And it's definitely a an opportunity to also go through a process that is more systemic, right? So this is where what I bring in is maybe different from just a ikigai approach or another approach, because this is specifically designed for people who know they want to contribute to change, right? They want to contribute to making a difference, and they want to do so in the most impactful way possible. So I also wrote a book for this group that is hopefully going to be announced later this year. So similar, people can go through this process in a type of guided journal by themselves if they prefer. And then the second group, so we had the people who already work on systems change, then backtracking to people who are looking for their purpose. And in the middle are people who know their purpose but want to deepen their impact, right? Maybe they've been working on the school system for years, but they realize that they're not achieving the results that they hoped. And with these people, I can dive into systems change strategies and kind of craft new approaches. So these are the three groups in a way that I serve. And it's going to be mostly online programs, but I'm also hoping to build really a community and in-person events. So if you prefer to go to the training in an in-person format, in a retreat format, that would also be possible.
Nora, amazing. And as I listen to you, I'm thinking every school should have that in the last 2 years of school in a short form to kick this off and just inspire young people with this notion that all of this is possible. What part do you want to play in the solution you need to see?
Yeah, thank you for that thoughtful question. I see that in the field of systems change, there are a few things that I noticed I am in my language, right, uniquely well positioned to contribute. So this is always what I look for, right? So when I left my last NGO, I could have gone to work for the government in international development cooperation in this, fancy career track that you're a good person, TM, right? So like it would have had a lot of benefits and attractive aspects. But I realized that I think many people can be amazing in this particular role, and probably even more amazing than I, because I'm not sure that I have the patience or the stamina to do office politics when what I see is change that is so urgently needed, right? And when I compare this potential path to Paraíba, which is very focused on bringing into the world in a way the fruits of the labor of the last 16 years. So it is focused on writing the books that I never was able to write so far, on putting the support out there at a scalable level, right? Because I used to do this in the Swiss context, but always one-on-one, one speech at a time, one training at a time, right? And now, because it's a book that can be read by potentially thousands of people, or it's an online program that can be accessed by hundreds of people, right? And doesn't require my time investment in the same level every time, I'm able to scale the number of people I can support. So that's why in my decision-making process of what should I do next, I ended up choosing to create what would become Paraíba, because I was like, this is based on what I've lived through firsthand. And it is based on what I've seen these hundreds of people I've supported go through firsthand. And it is based on what I think is missing in the field. I see a lot of amazing institutions doing great work, putting out theories and frameworks and training programs and all of that, which I went through, right? I went through a bunch of these really excellent training programs that I would recommend to anyone. So I'm not taking anything away from that in terms of its value. And they did not prepare me for the backlash I was about to experience. They did not prepare me for the challenges I was going to face the moment that I set foot into this field. And in the context of my Cambridge degree, I also did a dissertation and a piece of research on social innovation labs, which is one of the strategies that is most common in the system space. And I interviewed many, many people from across the globe on their experiences with this approach and the challenges that they faced. And what really was striking about the findings, the results, was that pretty much everybody spoke about challenges before the lab. So people didn't say, once we brought the stakeholders together, they really disagreed and it was hard, right? Like people were focused on making the lab happen was very, very hard. And they spoke about how hard it was to find funding, how hard it was to convince stakeholders to join, how hard it was to mitigate the conflicts, how hard it was on the team, and how many were at the burning out point or past the burnout point. So that was one of the key findings. Like doing this work, really making it happen is extremely difficult. And so that's where I really hope to make a difference. I hope to prepare the people that work with me, that listen to a podcast like this, that consume any of the content that I put out there for free, to have not just the shiny pitch of here's why we need to do systems change work, and here's why it's great, and here's why it's important, and here's how to do it, but also the shadow side, also the difficult part. To just be very, very honest about the cost that it can have, the risks that it brings, the challenges that it brings. So I think that's one piece where I really hope that by being just incredibly honest and transparent about my own journey, I can make a difference in the people that are either already experiencing these challenges or are about to, because they're about to set foot. And I think my motivation to do that is just also, I don't wish what I went through on other people, right? And I
Mm.
don't want to see this movement slowly die out because people step into the field, burn out, realized I cannot do this anymore, and go find some insurance job or, something where they can just kind of get by because they have been so burnt by the attempt at doing this work. So that's one thing where I really hope to make a difference. And then the other level is, how do we see ourselves more as a movement? Because the challenge that I see is that we are so many people working on this, but we are all in our own context, in our own countries, languages, topics, strategies, right? It's incredibly fragmented. In fact, even within a city, you will find fragmentation, right? You will find people who are both working to say end hunger in the city, and maybe they're even competing, because this is what the system has taught us, right? It has taught us competition over collaboration. And if you need to apply for funding, you may be competing for the same funding, and a foundation will weigh your project against the other project. So there's so many elements that are designed in to keep us fragmented and in a competition type relationship, or just also not even having the resources to think about what others are doing and to find synergies and to work together, because everyone is so like, I have this budget line for this program, like I need to get it done, it's already not enough. So like everyone's hanging on by a thread in the NGO and not for profit field in general.
Yeah.
So
And
I really hope to make a difference in that space. I hope that by, working together with funders directly, showing them the value of these frontline systems change workers, what they're doing, and building that bridge of trust, right? Because of course it's hard for a funder to say, yes, I will blindly fund you for the next 5 years, go do your thing, see you in 2030 something, right? Like they need some accountability. They need a trust dimension. They need some type of storytelling, visibility on, what is coming out, even if it's not KPIs that we just click through a checklist. So that's what I hope Paraima can become, a bridge of trust between funders and the people doing this work on the front lines by building this community, by building this track record of work and these, things that are needed for that trust to be able to be put from the funder into the people doing this work. So I really hope that this helps to see ourselves more as a movement and frees up resources to synergize more, to work together more, to share learnings with each other, so that all together we have a better shot at achieving our shared goal, which is systems change.
Nora, I love that you're a bridge builder, and I interview a lot of bridge builders, and that all operate in you all say more or less the same thing, which is so unbelievably important in these divided times where everyone sits in their silo and we get fed this narrative that we are so divided, which is not true. What tips do you give young people who are aspiring to be a part of the change they want to see?
What really strikes me as different in the generation that is growing up now, compared even to mine, is that those of them who have access to the information are paying attention. They are aware that the story has broken down. They are aware that the narrative that we've been still sold, and that, you've been probably sold as well. Like I'm a millennial, but we were told if you work hard, if you have good grades, if you study hard, you will get a good job, and then you will buy a house, and then you will da 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 da, right? Like this is the path. And now, just in my context in Switzerland, if you work hard, if you get the best grades, if you get the best job, you still cannot afford a house. in most, places where you would want to live. Okay, you can go really far away to the countryside, but then what is your job, right? So the story has just begun to break down. And it has broken down in a way for our generation, but for us, it broke down in the moment where we got to the point, right? We hit 30, we were supposed to have a house. Where is the house, right? So we were supposed to experience these things. Where are these things? And so we had to kind of grapple with the loss in the moment. But the generations coming up now, they already know. They already have seen the figures. They already have seen the projections. So they already know that the story that maybe their parents are still telling because, oh, we don't have another story to tell, right? We don't have another narrative that is inspiring and that gives people hope. So maybe we keep trying to regurgitate the same thing nonetheless, or maybe we're at a loss for what to tell the next generations. But they realize that something is wrong, something is broken. The rules of the games, the rules of the game have changed. They were probably, the odds were stacked against us to begin with, and they kind of see through that. So there is just a completely different like beginning point, right? And many of them are also aware of climate change and the reality that we have passed 1.5 degrees, which was supposed to be a maximum that we set for ourselves. They see the backlash against women's rights, against queer rights, right? They see the rising in fascism. And I believe there might be three groups among these young people. There may be those who have fallen prey to the right-wing extremist narratives, to the scarcity narratives, to the men are suffering the worst and white men, particularly narratives. And maybe they've fallen down that rabbit hole. And I think those young people, we definitely need to have better strategies to speak to notice when that begins to happen. And with regulation of social media and platforms, I hope that our governments will take action on this. I hope that parents will, become more aware of what's going on the screens of their kids. And then there are the kids who are very aware of all of this, right? Those I was just describing, who realize that things are broken, are breaking down. And I think the drive to act already in Greta Thunberg's generation, right? She's about 8 years younger than me, perhaps. In that generation and the generation even younger, I really struggle to imagine like how much more despair and urgency comes with that activism. Because for me, the activism at the time, like when you would say, "Oh, I care about the environment," people would be like, "Oh, that's nice. You found your passion. It's kind of cute." Like we were still at that stage where like climate change was a hypothetical and not a yearly flash flood, a yearly, wildfire taking people's homes away in front of our doorstep, right? Not just something far away. So I think either we fall into apathy from that place, either we think, oh, we've lost anyway, there's nothing we can do, and let me just do shine halls until the end of days, or it galvanizes us into action. And I really hope that there's a large percentage of the generations coming up now that are galvanized into action, that are called forth to be leaders and to be leaders in ways that are probably much more fearless than even I was at the time and I thought I could be, right? Because I was still willing to like play within the system to, move things forward. And I think if I were growing up now with the same awareness I had then, I would realize, oh, those systems, they're going to let me play along until it doesn't serve them anymore. Like we need to change something on a deeper level. So that makes you bolder, more courageous, more willing to really call forth solutions that are profound and transformative. And I really feel like it's so important that we don't just look to the young people, that we don't just say, oh, you're the leaders of tomorrow. Like they'll deal with the consequences of all of our collective choices, because what a burden, what a terrible burden we are placing, not just on the people who are young today, but the people who will be young 5 years from now, 10 years from now, people yet to be born. And so in a way, my message to the young people is, you know, thank you. Yes, keep going. We need you, right? Find where you can contribute and be as fearless as you can in the pursuit of what is yours to do, of your calling. And I also have an important message for literally everyone else, which is what will it take for you to be a good ancestor? Right? We often think of like, oh, our ancestors, and some people may have spiritual practices where they think of their lineages and they honor the people who've come before, who've helped liberate them generation by generation to be, maybe a free woman that they can be today, that the last generation couldn't be, 2 generations past, they couldn't be. What will it take for you to be a good ancestor? What will have your great grandchildren look back and think, wow, I'm so glad this one ancestor of mine, she did this, right? She said no, she refused, she broke out of line, she was an activist in this field. She put her life on the line for the rights of these people, for my rights. She wrote a book about this, she spoke out, right? Whatever the case may be, we all have different ways to contribute. So this is not to generalize anything, right? But what will it take in your personal situation for at the end of your life, even to be like, I think I did well. I am glad for the things that I contributed in this lifetime. I'm proud of my legacy. And what will it take for future generations to look back and think, wow, what a great ancestor?
Yeah. Nora, you said so many important things, and you have so much moral ambition with which you lead, which is very inspiring. And yes, the linear life path is no more. And so we need to be much more nimble than we used to, and we need to find different paths, which is why it's so important to have all the conversations and to give young people, but really everyone in the world, these different views that resonate, hopefully, in order for people to jump on bandwagons and come together and connect and collaborate. Nora, so what do you feel? You've talked about this daily leadership practice, which I love, and I've heard that in your TED Talk, which everybody should listen to. What is your daily practice that keeps you aligned and the leader that you want to be?
That's such a great question as well. Thank you. It's interesting because I find that often it's our biggest Achilles heel, our biggest challenges, the things that really have been at times maybe our downfall that end up becoming our biggest gifts if we dare to step through them like a portal, right? And not be defeated by them or not shy away from them. And in a way that is true for me also, right? So having grown up really with this fervor for change, for making a difference, for working so much, and this spirit of daily leadership, which the challenge then for me was, when have I done enough? How do I know? Right? I kind of give everyone the grace to say, well, we all do what we can and we all do, what we can each day. And how do I know that I have done all that I can? Is it if I fall asleep at the laptop? Is it when I am so exhausted, the screen blurs in front of my eyes? Like, when is it, right? At what point? And I think subconsciously, this is part of what has driven me to burning out and kind of I think will keep me on the edge of falling back into that maybe my whole life, right? So it's maybe like a companion, a challenge that I am journeying with and will be for a while. It's like if you were once an alcoholic, you don't say I am no more, right? You say I'm in remission. And I think I am a workaholic in remission in a way. So I'm rehabilitating myself to be a more balanced human being because I did have to learn that I cannot create a more just and regenerative world by exploiting myself. It doesn't work this way. It's like you cannot self-hate yourself into self-love, right? It doesn't work. We have to embody the paradigms, the visions that we wish to see for to be able to be channels through which they can come into the world. And so I really had to shift this for myself, that self-care and meeting my own needs is not being egocentric. It's not unjust when others are suffering. It's in fact part of my responsibility because if I do not do that, what I do is bring into the world paradigms of exploitation, of overwork, of burnout, and also communicating to other people, right? To people in my team, in my surroundings, people who may follow me, that this is what needs to be done, even if it's not my intention. So I really had to take myself to task and say, okay, Nora, this is really a problem. We really need to fix this. We really need to work on this. And so now I have a bunch of like guardrails and, safeguards in place to try and avoid get to that place. So these are things like regular breaks and at least once a year do some type of retreat, a silent retreat, a meditation retreat, a yoga retreat, something that completely takes me out of it, out of the distractions, out of the work frame. So there are these types of things. I have a support ecosystem, right, with different coaches or therapists that hopefully are able to flag it to me when they notice that I'm approaching a tipping point. And on a daily basis, what really helps me a lot is I have a dog. I had a dog, a rescue dog. He passed away, unfortunately, in March. So now we have a foster rescue dog at home. And I think having an animal with you, like just that, wants to play, wants to cuddle, wants to go out for a walk, like just helps me be so much more in my body and in the present moment than just in this virtual reality. So I think children, animals, in general, nature, and things like tracking things that are real, like the seasons and the cycle of the moon, like our ancestors used to, are just things that I started to do really on a daily basis that keep me in the flow of what is here right now and my own body. When I can and I have the dopamine for it, I try to integrate some movement. Usually dancing. Studies have also shown that that's one of the best things you can do for your mental health. It's even more effective against depression than antidepressants alone. So if I can integrate some dancing or some type of movement in addition to a walk into my day, I'll do that. But it's not always available. Just because the dopamine, the spoons are limited, right? So it is definitely something I struggle with still on a daily basis and that I'm also showing up with very transparently. So I have found art helps, dancing helps, the things we do with the well, right? These types of ateliers really, really help to tune in and enter a different flow, a different energy, and reconnect. And it's perhaps a forever work in progress for me to continue to show up for these supportive rituals day by day.
Yeah. And I love that you lead with that because it is a daily practice and it's a lifelong thing. And I think when we tell people otherwise, it's just lying to the people that we shouldn't be telling lies to because that's not helpful. And this vulnerability creates connection, and this connection creates bridges, and that leads to a better outcome and more systems change. Nora, I read this quote the other day, which I'm thinking of as I'm talking to you. We are hard on people and soft on systems, whereas we should be hard on systems and soft on people. And everything that you say to me is exactly that. And so I love that. I'm wondering what success looks like for you. If you think about Paraima, this container that you have put into the world to do all this amazing stuff, what does success look like for you?
Yeah, this is such a great quote that you shared, and it's very true. And people often come to me asking, do we need to change systems or change people? And in my view, it's a false dichotomy because we are the systems, right? There is this quote by David Bohm that the whole presence is itself through its parts. So the whole, the system, does not exist as an abstract entity. Like if we all tomorrow were to disappear, this abstract concept of capitalism would disappear in the same moment, right? So we are the system. So this is where the agency and the power and the ability to opt in or opt out or choose differently come in. And at the same time, we do not all wield the same degree of power within these systems, right? Certain billionaires in the world have a bigger power and therefore a bigger responsibility. So it is, in my perspective, indeed not helpful to, right, be so hard on the average person. And also, we shouldn't infantilize and disempower this person either. So that's why I mean it's a false dichotomy in my view, right? Like we need to hold systems accountable, be hard on them, work on changing them, especially those who feel called to it and are able to. And we need to all focus on what is it that I can do, that I can contribute. What is the margin of my power here? And many people have much more power than they think they do. So that's definitely something that resonates a lot with me. And in terms of what success is, that is such a hard question for me because I made the experience, as I was describing a little bit, that the vision, right, when I entered the systems change field was so big that I never had an experience of success, right? Like I could do incredible things. I could have fantastic speeches. I could have media clippings. I could have awards. I could have labs and people who tell me that something changed their life. We even had laws that we know were changed in a ripple effect thanks to the things we put in place and funders changed their policies, right? So there were incredible things happening, but because I was always falling short of what I thought I had to do, of what I thought the vision was and the goal was, I never experienced this feeling of, wow, this was successful. This is success. So I learned a lot from that, and I learned to shift the way I operate. And I don't want to remove the vision because I think being a visionary and holding a vision in our hearts is beautiful and so important, right? So I want to keep doing that. And the way that I approach it now is slow and steady, one step at a time. So rather than grasping for the vision, and as long as I have not seen it, I have failed, and I pull on the plant that I've planted so it grows quicker into the vision, the energy that I operate from now is that I hold the vision in my heart and I let it guide me for each decision that I take, even if it doesn't seem to make sense for the specific moment, right? So, for example, for the Changework Compass, it's 20 people. I could have done a bunch of calendar entries and a Zoom link, and it would have been fine, right? MVP style. But I'm building an infrastructure where hopefully I'll be able to support thousands of people. So I invested a lot in building a very, very nice back end infrastructure, right? With a course platform, with workbooks. So doesn't maybe make sense for the specific thing in the moment, but I take the decision based on my vision. But I operate from where I am and what I can realistically hold and bring into the world. And that changed everything for me. So that changed how I show up every day, how I work. It changed the way that I look to the vision because you can almost begin to resent the vision if you constantly are faced with the fact that you haven't yet reached it. But now I can let it inspire me and guide me and inform me. And I can focus on building my thing, the thing that I can do, that I can bring into the world step by step. And if the Changework Compass takes place, that's a success. If it sells out, wow, what an unexpected, incredible success, right? So I receive fantastic testimonials that how transformative it was. Wow, I did not expect this to be so successful. Amazing, right? So I get in the small steps to experience success much more. Of course, success in the large scheme of things for me would be that the majority of people on this planet don't just function, don't just go through the motions of what the system has them do or what they chose, but maybe without reflecting on it or having the information about it. But that the majority of people on this planet have conscious decisions, have agency in how they want to live their lives, and get to live them in a way that is in alignment with their values, and that they feel that they are empowered co creators of the future that they want to see. So I really, this is the deepest hope in a way that I hold, right? That yes, I want to see big systems transition and I want to see us living again in communities and I want to see us, right, like support each other and work to really live within what our planet can sustain. And it will be beautiful and magical. And if you don't know solar punk, maybe you can look that up as some nice imagery. But what I really wish is for people to be happy, right? To be well, to be able to live their lives in a way that is meaningful to them and that they can pursue their calling and bring their gifts. So that is the big picture success or dream. And I may not live to see it, but that is what I hold in my heart.
Nora, I think we're going to end on this beautiful note, and I'm so grateful for everything that you are and everything that you do, which is a lot. I love how you lead. I love that you lead with this moral ambition and these big visions. I love that you hold them like a like a compass, like you point your needle to where you want to go and you keep chipping away at it because that's exactly what's necessary. Thank you for being a bridge builder and thank you for leading so powerfully by example.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. If I can add one last thing in relation to this that we didn't touch upon is that I know that sometimes when listening to a conversation like this, someone may feel like, wow, like these people are so far away, right? What Stephanie has built is so far away from me, so aspirational. What Nora has done, I'm glad people like her exist. And kind of we tune out and we disconnect it from ourselves, right? So something I wanna bring in here is that I know it can be really scary to try. It can be so scary to change our minds and to say, I used to not care about this, now I care. I used to not see this issue, now I see this issue, and I want to try to make a difference. And sometimes people in this movement for change can be so hard on each other, and especially also people outside who are not even contributing and participating, like Brene Brown would say, people who are not in the arena, they're sitting
Yeah.
in the, right? They're like sitting and watching, and they are so vocal critics. And if you try and you say, I care about sustainability, and then you take one flight, they will like assault you, right? Ha ha ha. I got you. You don't have integrity. You are a performative activist. You are a fraud, whatever, right? And so I just want to like also put this out there that it is so important that, yes, of course, the best time to plant a tree would have been 30 years ago, but the second best day is today, right? And it is not a journey that is about perfection because it is impossible to be perfect in broken systems unless you say, I'm going to go live in this forest and live off berries and whatever I can scavenge, right? As long as we want to operate, even to change it within the system, we have to make trade-offs and compromises. And so I just really want to say if anyone, was listening to this and maybe felt like, oh, that's not me, like this is so aspirational, this is so far away from me, it would be such a big transformation to begin taking actions, to begin changing things about my life or my career or my purpose. You are welcome in this movement and we need you. And I so deeply believe that you have gifts that the world needs and that it's okay to be seen trying. It's okay to take it step by step. And none of us are perfect. None of us have figured it all out. I'm also still learning day by day about new topics that I wasn't informed about that hopefully I can integrate more in my work starting the next day, right? So just a message to say that everyone is welcome. Everyone has a contribution to make. We all make a difference and not to let this kind of fear or pressure of perfectionism prevent us from taking action, because that's another way in which we give away our power and we give away our agency to create the life that we truly are proud of and, feel has meaning for us. So that as an additional message to all of your wonderful listeners.
Yes, and